Welcome to the Heavy Spoilers Show. I'm your host Paul, and in this video we're breaking down Secret Invasion. The penultimate entry is now here, and everything's kinda ramped up before we hit the finale next week. Throughout this video, we're going to be recapping what happens in it, all the Easter eggs, and also giving our theories on what might go down next week. Please smash that like button, and if you're not subscribed, then make sure you do, because you don't want to miss our finale video. Now, last week's episode ended with Gravik's forces attacking President Ritzen's convoy, and during this they were disguised as the Russians. Thanks to Fury and Talos, the world leader managed to make it out, but these actions unfortunately didn't come without a cost. Talos was killed, leaving Fury on his own, and he's now lost everyone due to the Skrull invasion. Maria's gone, his wife can't be trusted, and now his closest ally has bit the bullet. This ending also revealed that Gravik had the Extremis powers to him, and that now takes us into the latest entry. Now, the episode is titled The Harvest, and this can mean a number of things in relation to the show. When you harvest something, you cultivate the crops and gather things together, just like how Fury is gathering his allies. However, Gravik could be seen as harvesting from the DNA of the creatures he has in order to go on and make himself a Super Skrull. On top of this, we also learn about a program called The Harvest, which I'm guessing is the vial that Fury gets at the end. Captain Obvious, but we'll talk about what's in that more later on in the video, as there's a lot to unpack with it. Now we begin in the aftermath of last week's attack, with Fury arriving at the hospital alongside the president. Man, he's bloody taking off free NHS healthcare! Get him! Now, this clearly shows why the president will be replaced by Harrison Ford's General Ross, which we'll talk more about towards the end of the video. We see on the UKN24 News Network that it's making headline news, along with a photo of Talos in his Skrull form. The UKN24 network has appeared in the series before, and it's now reporting on the panic at the president's motorcade. We can also see the weather's saying sunny in the UK. You're taking the It's been raining non-stop all week, mate. Now, Nick knows this will cause some issues with the planet, not the weather. The Skrulls, and though Earth has been attacked by aliens before, they haven't been this close to our world leaders. Anyway, we cut to Russia, and I'm guessing they got back there so quickly because of the jet we saw them landing with in last week's entry. Assembling the officers, they clearly see the campaign as a failure, and we learn more of what Gravik's been up to. Turns out he did actually want to steal the Avengers' DNA, but it wasn't at any of the sites that they ended up raiding. Now, this is in line with the comics, as just before Secret Invasion started, the Skrull Emperor kidnapped the Illuminati and took their DNA. Pagan stands up to him finally, but he goes out after aligning slightly with how he did in the comics. That had him posing as Elektra, and he was one of the first Skrulls that infiltrate the Avengers. The MCU version has him trying to steal their DNA, but Pagan was revealed to be a Skrull after fighting a brainwashed Echo. This showed to the heroes that the Skrulls had upped their game, and he was impaled by Echo just like how he's impaled by Gravik here. Now, when he reverted back into his natural form, everyone was dumbfounded to see one of their own was actually a Skrull, and it blew everyone away. Previously, the deception had only gone so far, and they weren't able to outsmart telepaths and people with heightened senses. This took things to the next level though, and it showed that the Skrulls had the ability to mimic memories, which they've also done in the series. Now, Pagan was pretty much used as a pawn, and that's sort of becoming the case in the show too. He and the Splinter Cell he led in episode 3 all put their lives on the line to carry out the Neptune mission, and Gravik revealed this was just something to flush out the mole. If they had have launched the missile, then all the people they were playing would have been looked at more closely, and most likely they would have been jailed. His death clearly rubs the entire team the wrong way, and being called nameless and faceless makes his inner circle start to splinter. Now, at this point, he comes up with a crazy plan, and he reaches out to Rhodey on the phone. If you stuck around for the credits last week, you'll know that the Skrull who's playing Rhodey is actually called Rava, and this is a character that comes from the comics. Someone who speaks about themselves in the third person, which always annoys Paul, but I'm gonna let her off because both her children died, leaving her thirsty for revenge. Dishing out carnage in the galaxy as a pirate, she was eventually given a life sentence on a deep space torture prison. However, here she became allies with several characters, and this actually included Black Bolt. His teleporting pet Lockjaw came to the rescue, and he gave the pair a way that they could escape. Now, they managed to escape, and the pair left each other peacefully, deciding that they were just going to go their separate ways. In the show, we don't know exactly how long she's been posing as Rhodey for, but Kevin Feige came out and said that it's beyond just this series. He stated that there's been a number of different projects, but I don't know, it kind of robs Endgame, I think, if it turns out he was a Skrull. I don't know whether they'll take it all the way and do a recast meta joke, but yeah, hopefully we get it clarified exactly when things changed. Either way, Gravik starts telling her to tip off the president that it was the Russians and Skrulls, and Gravik also talks about how the Skrulls are willing to sacrifice themselves if the plan doesn't fall in place. He's gone full on Jim Jones, and again, it's going to completely kill all the loyalty that he has if it gets out. Now that Talos has gone at the hands of him, the Skrulls are on a very dark path, with it potentially leading right to their extinction. We've had lip service to this with the Skrulls before as well, as the Council talked about how the Kree War was carried out by Skrulls who refused to back away from the battle. That happened in the case of Gravik's parents who died in the conflict, and he was somewhat enamored by their death, which is why he has this death wish here. Now as they arrive in the hospital, we see the other security guard with his arm in a sling. This was broken by Fury back in episode 2, and it happened right at the restaurant. Man clearly hasn't got time for Rava at this point, and he plays his hand and reveals that he knows Rhodey is a Skrull. I love this scene with Rhodey threatening Nick, and seeing all the guards standing pointing their guns at him of course symbolises that all guns are aimed at him. Behind them are the Skrulls, and it cements that those he would normally look to as the faces of his allies are standing against him with his enemies. Now at this point we cut to the title sequence, but for this point of the video, I'm gonna cut to our sponsors. I gotcha! Cannonballs! This summer is not about the size of those cannonballs, yeah? It's about making a splash with our friends at Manscaped. Get prepped for the barbecue season with the best hot dogs anyone's ever seen. Let the meat speak for itself with Manscaped's Performance Package 4.0 and go to manscaped.com/heavy spoilers and enter the code heavy spoilers at checkout for 20% off and free shipping. The Manscaped Performance Package 4.0, been using it for years now, advertising these guys because I love them so much, and they've got everything you need to make yourself stand out this summer. Inside it is a lawnmower 4.0, got skin safe technology for trimming, a 4K LED spotlight so it shines your face as you're doing it, shines other areas as well that you might not be able to see that well. It's waterproof too, has a travel lock function when you click it 3 times so it locks into place and doesn't set off when you're on the go. It's absolutely brilliant and you need to pick one of these up. Now the kit also has the weed whacker too. I got in trouble on the last advert from you guys for using it on my nose and trimming up my ear hairs, but you could see in action just how good it was, and yeah, absolutely love this piece of kit as well. Another lifesaver too. Now that you can feel safe wearing a low-cut swimsuit without any stragglers peeking out, you can also use Manscaped's liquid formulations that will bring your balls a brand new freshness. They've got the Crop Preserver Ball Deodorant Spray that keeps you cool from sunrise to sunset, and it's got a soothing aloe vera formula that makes it the best in the business. Manscaped have also thrown in 2 free gifts, and you get the Manscaped Anti-Chafing Boxer Briefs and the Shed Travel Bag. Take this with me anytime I go anywhere, keeps the kit safe, and yeah, packs nicely in my suitcase and just has it. It's got it secure, I don't have to think about it. Now as a treat, you should also add in the crop mops for your balls, you know, they're just little wipes that keep things nice and refreshed, hydrated, and yeah, they're gonna change your world. That's manscaped.com/heavy spoilers and enter the code heavy spoilers at checkout for 20% off and free shipping. Just go to the link in the description right now, check out this sweet saver, and get yourself ready for that sweet, sweet summer. Alright! Now we cut back to London and see that Fury's shooting of Maria has gone viral. Sonya realizes that the time's growing short and that she has to act fast to get rid of the one in her ranks. This involves her shooting Tony Curran's character, who we saw her meeting with in episode 1. Now shooting him reveals to the guards that he's actually a Skrull, which somewhat riffs on what happens in the comics. In the Savage Land, a big battle between the heroes and Skrulls took place that had the Avengers not knowing who they could actually trust. Because the Skrulls looked exactly like them, they had no idea what was happening and were wildly outmatched. Due to the environment and the fact it was a fight, they couldn't actually test who was a Skrull, and if they got up close and personal, it was just going to be too late. So what Black Widow said was that she'd just shoot whoever she saw in the leg or arm, and then if they bled purple, she'd know they were a Skrull. She said she was just going to shoot everyone, and if you pushed on it yet, this is probably the best way to find out who's a Skrull and who isn't. I'm not saying you should shoot the thumbs up button, but you know what to do, and Olivia Colman completely kills it, which makes me hope we see more of her in the MCU. Was actually surprised that she wasn't in last week's entry, but she is an ally that Fury can now turn to. Sonya is the granddaughter of Union Jack from the Howling Commandos, and the group she works with might also have things next week that help set up the future. In the comics, we had the team MI-13, and this dealt with the supernatural stuff in the Marvel Universe. Sonya may end up being upgraded to them, and we are getting the groundwork laid for them to appear in the MCU. Moon Knight, Dane Whitman, and Blade were all members, and when we last encountered these characters, they were all in London. So maybe next week we'll end with a tease to her getting something in MI13, but that's a big you done, have you done? Touch a moon. I love you, Sophie. Now back in Russia, we see Beto questioning Pagan's death, and in a nice little touch, we see Gravik filling up on sugar. He of course did this when meeting Talos, and just like how Talos used that as a time to attack, his officers do this too. It's pretty violent, and they put a bag over his head before attempting to suffocate him right on the table. Man takes out the old scroll in a scene that we can't show, and clearly the super scroll powers leave him able to dominate them all in battle. He kills Beto in front of the civilians, and though he survives this, it's unsure whether his leadership will. Now, he of course doesn't care because he knows that, in a loss, he'll still get the death that he's been seeking. Anyway, back in London, we watch as Fury goes back to the place where he welcomed the Skrulls to Earth in episode 2. They were given a new home after fleeing the war, and the location itself actually has a deeper meaning to it. As Fury says, London was badly attacked during the Blitz in World War II, which could mirror the Skrulls fleeing their home after the war with the Kree. Brixton was actually where the Windrush generation settled, and in case you don't know, this was a group of citizens from Caribbean countries that were invited to come to the UK to work and build lives. It was generally seen as a positive time, but decades later, the government somewhat went back on their word and deported several people against their rights due to them stating they didn't have the legal right to be here. I've done a far more in-depth discussion on it for our second episode video, but it was a really controversial thing that made lots of government ministers end up resigning because it was such a big fuck up. I don't think it's a stretch to say that the Skrulls could be a comment on immigration and the promises of a new home, only for this to eventually be revoked. Definitely feels like this location was picked for a specific reason, but yeah, let me know below if you agree or disagree. Now Gaia talks about how she knows her father died, and we know from the trailers that there was a scene in which he found his body. Weird they cut this from the show because it pretty much gave away in the teasers that he died, so yeah, you could have just left it out completely, but it at least explains how she has his body in the back of the van. Either way, in case you missed our last video, the death of Talos actually has roots in Greek mythology. The figure there was seen as a leftover from the Bronze Age, and all of the legends involving him end in his death. This mirrors how Talos is an example of the older Skrull way of thinking, which was to avoid war at all cost. The show of course has many metaphors for immigration, and we've seen Talos has somewhat represented the idea how if one proves their usefulness that they'll be accepted. This was even shown symbolically in the Skrulls arriving in Brixton, which was also the place that saw the Windrush generation settling in Britain. Her guy is at a point where she's lost two of her parents due to Gravik, and she's gonna have to carry forth the ideals of Talos, which is to avoid extinction. Though last week showed that she didn't agree with her dad's plans, I think she will end up adopting certain aspects of it, but change it so that the Skrulls no longer have to remain in the shadows. I actually think next week might see her taking on an Abigail Brand type role, and she'll end up going to Saber with Fury as his right hand. In case you don't know, Brand's a half-alien / half-mutant member of SWORD who was on the Pekin Secret Invasion when the Skrull masquerading as Dum Dum Dugan arrived there and destroyed it. Due to Gaia gaining those Super Skrull powers, this could cover the half-mutant part, and she's of course an alien due to her being a Skrull. Now Maria and Talos are both dead, I think episode 6 will close out with them working together on Saber, and that she'll appear in some form or another during the movie The Marvels. As she talks about the original Avengers DNA, which is called the Harvest, again tying back to the title. I actually think Fury might have been attempting to find a way to clone the Avengers, or potentially he was trying to do his own super soldier program based off their DNA. The only reason that the Hulk even exists is because they were trying to redo the super soldier program, and maybe Fury was doing the same thing. Either way, the police show up, and we cut to Sonya delivering a delicious scene where she meets the Dalton Skrulls. Getting the plans for a machine, we watch as she tortures the entire place, and Guy Dalton breaks free and takes his wife hostage. However, Sonya don't mess around, mate. No messing around here, and this could make the scientist, more open to giving her secrets because she's just saved her life. Now, someone else with her tensions quite high is Gaia, who, alongside Talos' body, ends up going to Fury's home. She goes past the masks on the wall, which symbolically have represented how the Skrulls wear different faces. The artwork hanging up in Fury's home has all been centered around stuff like this too, with some paintings depicting bodies almost like they're shapeshifting. I know this is actual art by an actual artist, but yeah, I think that this was chosen for a specific reason. Anyway, Gaia passes by the mask from last week, which Fury actually managed to shoot directly in the eye. He of course lost his, and looking back, he might have purposely hit this as a way to show what he gave up for Vara. He never actually wanted to kill Vara because of his love for her, which is of course why he purposely missed. This was carried across with her as well, and the pair wanted to ease the other's conscience if they managed to shoot them. However, them both missing meant they both lived, but this shot in the eye may have been to remind her of the love they had. Anyway, she's went to Vara to get her help to make a Jedi ceremony for her father. Saying goodbye to the Skrulls involves lighting someone on fire on a funeral pyre and giving an offering which involves her mother's wedding ring. They need to say a prayer, and we actually saw Talos uttering things to the dead Skrulls and Captain Marvel, which lined up with this. Elsewhere, we see Rava going to tell Ritson about the Skrull facility, and this is obviously to get them to play into Gravik's hands. He says England's on board, and as we know, the PM here is in fact a Skrull, which, the man didn't even understand how a petrol station worked, so I'll believe it. Now, striking Russia would cause World War III, and Gravik's plans are all kind of falling into place. Now, Gravik reaches out directly to Nick to request the harvest. We see Fury also going on a private jet, and shoutouts to editor Matt for realizing that this is the one that Fury actually wrote in at the end of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Season 1. Now, this is provided to him by none other than Rick Mason, who you might recognize coming from Black Widow. He of course got Natasha her planes, and it makes sense that he's providing this here. Anyway, we see Guy and Vara returning to the latter's home to talk about why she and Fury decided to make a home there. It's clear Vara is carrying anger still over the fact she couldn't be herself, and this was a question she of course asked Fury last week. The silence is cut short by gunshots though, which kinda ends up kicking everything up a gear. Now, this shootout in the home was released as a clip on YouTube last night, and I noticed they're tending to go with the more action heavy scenes in the preview because they obviously want to hook people. Look, I've seen the viewing figures, and I don't know if that Cold War espionage thriller thing they're going for is the general audience vibes. So yeah, we need stuff like this, and we can not only catch the bullet holes from the shooting last week, but we also see that Vara has weapons in the lab. Now, if you're wondering why she had to go to the safety deposit box for a gun, it's because I think that was instructed by the Skrulls so she'd have a weapon to kill Fury with. Either way, the pair have clearly been playing Modern Warfare, and they're adept at clearing out the room, speed reloading, and using the noob cannon to take people out. Now, from here we cut to a Finnish airport and see that they're on the lookout for Nick. Using one of the masks we saw on both Winter Soldier and Black Widow, he manages to go in and sneak past customs. Known as the Widow's Cloak, I was surprised this hasn't been brought out before because we have a way for the humans to basically shapeshift too. This is of course the Skrulls' greatest talent, and I think using this would have helped to even the odds as they could have even spied on the Skrulls. Just seemed like a misstep when the humans can also change their appearance too, and to be honest, I thought this episode was pretty meh overall. Just seemed to be saving everything for the finale next week and giving us reveals that we figured out weeks and weeks and weeks ago. Now, saying that, the harvest is a pretty interesting idea, and we can at least start to see why Fury blames himself. He was the one who sent Gravik in to collect the Avengers' DNA, and doing this has now inspired his plan. In episode 2, when talking to the Council, Gravik said he had a plan for the Avengers, and attempting to get their DNA to copy them might have been that all along. Now, at this point, Nick goes to one of his graves, which somewhat riffs upon the one that we saw at the end of Winter Soldier. We know from what he says that he has several of these across the planet, and these are something that he's also implemented in the Marvel Universe. Known as Dead Drops, Dead Drops? The Avengers game even had them opening up and revealing underground headquarters. Here though, they have to scale things back because they haven't got the budget, but it shows how much Nick has been planning ahead. He's got supply drops laid out everywhere and probably a different wife in every different country, eh? It's your fault for not shapeshifting into Naomi Campbell in the 90s. God damn, he couldn't even do that. God damn, couldn't even do that for him. God damn. Now, Sonya asks a very good question, which is why he hasn't called in the Avengers. He says he hasn't got the budget to be wheeling out movie stars for a TV show constantly, and also because this is personal for him. He has to be the person the planet can rely on, otherwise he's just dust. This obviously calls back to the ending of Infinity War, which in some respects was caused by him. Civil War had the Avengers falling out, and he'd failed to bring together a united team that could work together to defeat Thanos. Endgame showed that if they were united, then they could beat him, so some of the responsibility does rest on his shoulders. She also says a Scandinavian cemetery makes her feel like she should have brought a scythe, which I think might be a nod to the Seventh Seal. That was a Swedish, have to make sure I say Swedish film in case people kick off, but the country is part of the area known as Scandinavia. It's a classic, and it actually influenced a lot of how death's portrayed in films. At this point, the grave lifts up to reveal a vial, whilst Nick also reveals to Sonya that he married a Skrull. I'm guessing the vial might be too much for Gravik, and that in taking it, it might end up killing him. Might not, but either way, it could act as a way for Fury to completely destroy it, as he's probably realised he shouldn't have this power because it seems very dangerous. Now, we did get clips in the trailer that show Gravik looking like the Hulk, and though people thought this was just the Cull Obsidian powers, it could be linked in with the DNA. Either way, Fury putting his eye patch back on is of course symbolic, and this is very important for a number of reasons. Throughout the series, they've talked about how he's out of step, and even his introduction had him stumbling a bit as he walked to meet Maria. Here though, he's becoming more and more like his classic self, and how we remember the character being in his prime. Fury removed the eye patch at the end of the Winter Soldier, and this was to of course access the data attributed to the second user account that he'd set up. However, he didn't wear it at the end, but he did put it back on for Age of Ultron, Avengers Infinity War, and also of course Endgame. I'm actually wondering if these will be revealed to be times Talos was playing him, because let's be honest, who wants to go to a funeral? Now, in the car at the end of Infinity War, Maria also called him Nick, which is something they doubled down on here, is showing the person doesn't really know him. Far From Home had him wearing it too, but as we know, that was actually Talos. So yeah, I think it would be interesting if we learned he'd actually kept it off since Winter Soldier, as it would add even more meaning to him putting it back on here. Now next week's obviously the finale, and like most MCU shows, I'm guessing it's going to set up a lot of things going forward. In the case of this, we actually know a lot about what's coming down the line, and the Marvel's trailer of course gave away where Fury was before we even got to the show. He's of course returning to Sabre, and we know that he's going to be joined by Monica Rambeau. As I said earlier, I think Guy will be part of this too, and if you cast your mind back to WandaVision, then you might remember that a Skrull recruited Monica to what we now know as Sabre. So I think Gaia will join the Skrulls on the ship, and they'll then investigate the anomaly in space. We might even get a hint to something big going on there, and I think we'll get a tease to what she's looking into. There has been stuff leaked about the Marvels and what this is, and if you've read the lead up to Secret Invasion, then you might have a fair inkling. Now on Earth, I think that humanity might actually have an adverse reaction to learning that there are Skrulls among us. I think that though Ritson might try and buy them some goodwill, that ultimately he's going to lose, which is why Harrison Ford's General Ross can come in and take power. We know from the stuff on Captain America Brave New World that he'll be playing President Ross, and thus the power and politics need to change at some point. Now this kind of builds off the back of the comics, but on a grander scale. After the events of Civil War, Tony Stark was the director of S.H.I.E.L.D. overseeing everything. Under his watch, the Skrulls snuck in, and this sort of mirrors how they've infiltrated things under Ritson. When you think about it, his closest advisor was a Skrull, and it's gonna end up looking pretty bad for him. Now the comics had Norman Osborn actually defeating the Skrulls' leader, and he was front and center of taking them down. He was then hired as a director of S.H.I.E.L.D., and from this position, he created the Dark Avengers. With the case of President Ross, I feel like he'll make the Thunderbolts, and as we know, they're going to be getting their own movie. Thunderbolt Ross could definitely be teased at next week, and that's the way I think things are going to go externally. Now internally, we have seen shots of Fury fighting Gravik in the reactor, which has been shown in the trailers. My guess is that he's either trying to destroy the machine, or that this will be used as a way to depower Gravik. It could even be both, and that will make it not only so that he can be imprisoned, but it'll also stop others from being created. I really enjoy Gravik, say what you want about the show, so I hope he stays around, and even if they don't depower him, just send him to the raft. So yeah, that's my thoughts on the series and what I think is going to happen in it, and obviously I'd love to hear your thoughts too, so make sure you drop them below. Please hit the thumbs up button, and if you want to support the channel as a member of the Spoiler Society, then please hit join. You'll get early access to videos every week, and it goes such a long way to keeping us independent and also helping us out. Now if you want something else to watch, we've got a video on screen right now going over all the Deadpool leaks and all the updates we have. Definitely head over there if you're curious about that Marvel's post-credit scene as we go into it in more detail, and yeah, hopefully I see you over there right after this. By the way, huge thank you for sticking through the video. I've been your host Paul, and I'll see you next time. Take care, peace.